Going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle, at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show, going back and taking a look at racing from this past Saturday. That would be September the 8th, graded stakes action from Kentucky Downs. Unfortunately, we only have 4 gradeds that we're going to go over. There's a number of races that are included in this week's stakes montage, but the reason there's only 4 gradeds that we'll go over for the 4 recaps because weather kind of didn't cooperate on Sunday afternoon, so that eliminated some other races that we would have gone over, and weather sounds like it's going to be a pretty big thing going forward for the rest of this week. Everyone that's down in the sort of path, potentially anyway, of Hurricane Florence, stay safe, fingers crossed it's not nearly as bad as it sounds like it could end up being. If you listen to this thing in podcast form, like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Get all the latest offerings from DRF TV. Give us a thumbs up as well. If you're over on iTunes, write us a little review. Give us a positive rating. Always greatly, greatly appreciated. As I said, only 4 gradeds that we'll go over, and let's kick things off with the big one. 1.5 miles on the Kentucky Downs turf course, which is a little bit of an odd configuration as far as we're concerned here in the United States. It is the Kentucky Turf Cup Grade 3 event. It was the nightcap on Saturday afternoon. You had a full field of 12 signed on in here, and your post-time favorite was Oscar-nominated, a horse that has had success in this race over this course in the past, and you can understand he made a lot of sense. You figured he had a little bit of tactical speed. I don't think anybody anticipated him to be quite as far back as he was in this spot. And if you didn't like him, and let's call a spade, Oscar-nominated is not the fastest horse we've ever seen. He's usually very, very consistent in that sort of mid to high 90 range. But if you were so inclined, there were other interesting alternatives to take shots against him with. Ultimately, one of the alternatives gets the job done. Here's the stretch run of this year's Kentucky Turf Cup.
Bigger Picture has made steady progress, and way on the outside comes Oscar-nominated. He's extremely wide, but is in gear now, coming from out of the pack. There's less than a 1/4 mile to go. Bigger Picture, Solio. Here comes on the inside, Multiplier. Oscar-nominated is going to have to dig deep. Arklo's got a big shot. As they come into deep stretch, here come Bigger Picture and Arklo. They tackle Solio. There's a 16 to go. Arklo leads to Bigger Picture. It's Arklo in front. Arklo, Solio, and Bigger Picture. Arklo and Florent Giroux stylishly. They take the Calumet Farm Kentucky Turf.
Arklo gets the job done for Brad Cox at odds of 6-1. He wins this year's Grade 3 Kentucky Turf Cup, followed by Bigger Picture, one of the handful in here for Mike Maker, who runs second at odds of 9-2, and Solio, a good effort from him at odds of 13-1. 4th place finisher, sad news with Bronson. He finishes a good 4th at 77-1. Unfortunately, past the wire, suffers a catastrophic injury and needed to be euthanized. Thoughts with the connections. Never a good thing, but unfortunately have to report it. Bronson euthanized following the Kentucky Turf Cup. The winner, Arklo. Let's discuss him a little bit more, shall we? You take a look. He is 5 of 15 lifetime. He has been in the money on 2 other occasions, over $850,000 in career earnings, owned by Donegal Racing, Joseph Bolger, and Peter Conway. Trained by Brad Cox, bred by John R. Penn and Frank Penn in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Florent Giroux, and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Arch, out of an Empire Maker mare named Unbridled Empire. Now, here's going to be another difficult piece with this sort of recap edition. The Kentucky Downs races are very difficult to analyze because it's such an odd configuration, and it's so different than what we're used to. So what are these horses going to do going forward? Is this necessarily sort of indicative of what is to possibly come for these horses? A 100 buyer speed figure for Arklo, but it's hard to know. Is that 100 going to translate? Let's say, should he go to Keeneland? Should he go to Churchill Downs? Should he go to any of these other spots? Nonetheless, it was a good effort from him. He comes home in 24:56, which is one of the better times. It's not one of the fastest times, but he finished very well when you consider compared to a horse like Bigger Picture, who came home in 24:38. Solio came home in just over 25 seconds. You had Bronson, who again, unfortunately, ill-fated Bronson, came home in 23:99. And Oscar-nominated, the 2-1 favorite, beaten. He came home in 24:73. So very, very competitive for Arklo. He's always been a horse that has hinted at some ability. Brad Cox had said that we always thought that this horse would get better with age, really be a good 4-year-old and even a 5-year-old. To be honest with you, I just don't know what to make of him, because I never really had thought that he had taken a step forward from his early 3-year-old form. Pedigree-wise, the turf was supposed to be what he wanted all along, and when they finally moved him over, he really sort of took his game to the next level. But then he sort of plateaued, and it just didn't seem like he was really getting any better, and there was no real improvement to see. Now you see an effort like this where he pops a triple-digit Beyer speed figure, but again, I would just seriously caution, it's so difficult, and this isn't a knock, it's just, it is what it is. It's very difficult to analyze the horses exiting these races because it is such an odd configuration. You're going uphill at one point, you're going downhill, you have a sharp bend, you have a wide bend. It's just not what you're used to or what these horses are accustomed to once you go to Keeneland, once you go to Churchill, once you go to, I'm making it up, Belmont Park or Gulfstream or anywhere else. It's just a very unique situation. Some horses handle it and some don't. Arklow was a horse that was mid-pack. Flo rode him very, very confidently for the most part throughout the majority of the run. Turning for home, finds that seam. Good on him. And this is really something that I don't think, I know I don't emphasize it enough, and I don't think handicappers in general emphasize it enough. There is one thing to say, well, perfect trip, X, Y, and Z, it all worked out. For the most part, Arklow worked out a very, very nice trip. He was a little bit slow out of the gate, but that, no big deal. I mean, it was a mile-and-a-half turf race. That's not going to be the end-all, be-all. When the hole opened up turning for home for Arklow, you have to credit the horse for having the ability to quicken to get through that hole, because sometimes horses will find holes, but if they can't physically get through there in time, it's one thing if you have a big finish, a big late, you can run very, very well at the end of it. But to have that sort of quick acceleration to get yourself into a spot that may not be the most comfortable and then be able to stay on with it, that's the hallmark, I think, of a very, very good horse. And Arklow is a very talented horse. There's no denying that. I'm just going to be very, very interested to see where they choose to go with him. I personally don't view him as a Breeders' Cup kind of horse. But now you have to think about it and you go, well, what are the sort of alternatives? What are the other options? Is a mile and a half? Is this now all of a sudden what his game is, as opposed to those sort of more middle distance races? Thought it was a fine effort from Arklow, a deserving winner of this year's Kentucky Turf Cup. As far as bigger picture is concerned, look, he's rock solid. The old boy still has a little bit of fight left in him. 7 years old. He was the old man in this group. I don't think it was a bad effort. I don't think he's quite what he once was, but he's still the kind of horse that can go out there, make money, and be competitive in certain instances, in certain graded spots, if you just pick and choose where you want. And again, I believe Bigger Picture has run well at Aqueduct. I would wait and see. That Red Smith handicap that comes up in November, that may be an instance where you get some of these other horses that they're not Breeders' Cup caliber, but the longer distance, I believe the Red Smith's at a mile and 3/8, so maybe that's a spot for a horse like this. Solio, he's really kind of come into his own. I think he's a nice little horse. Longer distances have certainly helped him. Oscar nominated, like I said, it is what it is. He is a nice horse. He's yet to Beyer over 99. 99 has been his career best, and he always lives sort of in that mid to high 90 range. You basically got that here. As far as the rest of the field is concerned, I don't really think there were any trips or anything too discerning. There was nothing that really stuck out as far as anybody having issues or anything like that. Perhaps some horses took to it and some didn't, but when I look at this as a whole, I say it was a pretty fairly run race, and I think the best horse probably got the job done. Arklow, I will say, a disappointing effort, in my opinion, from Manitoulin. I had picked him in this race going into it. He was chilly on the board basically throughout, which immediately for me was a little bit of a red flag, but at the same time, he just never looked comfortable, and I had said the only other time he had run at Kentucky Downs was prior to him being gelded, so I thought maybe, and really his game had changed once they stretched him out and after the gelding process, and I thought maybe this was going to be one of those instances where, say, don't take that first run at Kentucky Downs and don't hold it against him. I can't help but think that, okay, now maybe there's just more to it, that he just doesn't like Kentucky Downs. He needs to rebound at a more conventional situation, and we'll find out. Maybe the Manhattan was just a one-off. And we know that he won that Hollywood Turf Cup out at Del Mar last year. I think he's a decent horse. I think there is a race for him. Maybe the Manhattan was a bit of a mirage, but I think he's better than what we saw on Saturday, and I would give him at least the benefit of the doubt going elsewhere. Kentucky Downs clearly doesn't work for him. A horse that Kentucky Downs does work for, though, is Arklow. Brad Cox, Donegal and company, they get the job done with an impressive effort. Again, how you sort of analyze it going forward, that's up to you. That's up to the handicapper. But at the end of the day, you know that Arklow likes Kentucky Downs, and a mile and a half he can stay at. We'll find out where does he actually stack up from a class standpoint, though, should they try bigger and better purses going forward. Arklow gets the job done in the Grade 3 Kentucky Turf Cup with a 100 Beyer. The 9th race Saturday at Kentucky Downs, it was the Grade 3 Kentucky Downs Turf Sprint. 6.5 furlongs over the undulating turf course. You had a field of 8 signed on. This was a wide open race. Of the 8 betting interests, 7 of them were single digits. You only had one horse that was double digits, Little Chesney, and guess what? He ended up finishing last. This was a wide open race, and really it was a scramble. You had them all covered by about, I don't know, 2.5 lengths when it was all said and done. This was a very, very fun race to watch. It's going to be interesting to see what we get coming out of it. Here's the stretch run of this year's Kentucky Downs Turf Sprint.
Proforma's going to stay at the rail. Undrafted, fanned wide, but he's in gear now. And also Conquest Panthera is coming on from last. They're in the final quarter of a mile now. Blind Ambition, White Flag, undrafted, Conquest Panthera. The outside four now roaring forward. Done Deal tries to hang tough. Vici is in it. It's wide open and deep stretch. They're coming for the 16th pole. White Flag, Done Deal, Proforma, undrafted, Vici. Proforma up the inside. Proforma and White Flag close. Proforma. I think Proforma got it.
Proforma gets the job done for Joe Bravo and Mike Stidham at odds of 7-1. He finishes first, gets the head and the nose down ahead of White Flag, who runs second as your 5-2 favorite, followed by Vici, who runs a good third at odds of 8-1. If you played that trifecta for 50 cents, comes back $93 and some change. Let's discuss Proforma a little bit more. Proforma 8 times in the money from 10 lifetime starts. 4 of them victories, $442,990 in career earnings, owned by Dars Incorporated, trained by Mike Stidham, bred by Reggie Beeson and Tim Beeson, in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Joe Bravo, and you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He's by Munnings out of a Salt Lake mare named Casey's Irish Pride, 94 Beyer speed figure for Proforma, 94 Beyer for White Flag, 93 for Vici, 92 for Undrafted. The old boy at 8 years old still has a little bit left there, and Blind Ambition, who runs 5th, gets a 91 Beyer speed figure. When you look at the come-home times, Proforma comes home in 29:25, White Flag 29:19, Vici 29:37, and Undrafted 29:14. This really, to me, this is an interesting race to dissect for a number of reasons. One, like I said about the Kentucky Turf Cup, and I'm going to say about the other 2 races that we'll go over after this one. I think some horses handled the course better than others. That's not rocket science. I'm not breaking any news there. But with a race like this at 6.5 furlongs, and it probably plays a little bit longer just because it is such an odd sort of configuration, and that stretch goes on forever and a day, it's going to be interesting to see how the horses from this race come back, especially if they're thinking Breeders' Cup. And it sounds like Mike Stidham and company, they're thinking that that's a possibility anyway for Proforma. Now keep in mind, 5.5 furlongs this year at Churchill Downs for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. It sounds like a next possible start for Proforma could be on October the 6th at Keeneland in the Woodford, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf. So it's going to be very interesting to see if he can transition this form over to that sort of configuration. I don't have any reason to doubt that because he has run well going shorter in the past, but I kind of got the feeling that this was something that helped him, this additional ground, this more demanding sort of configuration, as opposed to the bang, crack sprinters that go out there and can just drop the hammer and drop 21 and change on your head and keep going. I thought the fact that Proforma dug in as gamely as he did down on the inside, especially when everything was working out very well from a trip standpoint. He's down on the rail. Joe Bravo has to angle out over heels when the pace setter starts faltering, and starts backing up. Then he angles back down to the inside, and the fact that this horse dug in as gamely as he did in a spot that is not the most comfortable for horses to be in, down on the rail with another horse that's out just to your outside, digging in, I thought it was a really, really impressive performance. Again, the question now becomes, do you think this is going to be sort of a horse that can transfer this sort of form over to the 5.5? And we'll find out if Keeneland, if it works there, and then obviously just a few weeks later, if it works at Churchill Downs beneath the Twin Spires for the Breeders' Cup. But Proforma, I think he's a very talented horse. I think he's a nice horse. He's going to need to run faster, truth be told, if he's going to be a legitimate threat for a race like the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. But look, right now, I mean, that's always one of those races that it feels like there are a number of horses going into it that have legitimate chances. And you know what? He's probably going to get a little bit overlooked in the wagering, depending on what happens at Keeneland. But Proforma, look, he's an interesting sort of alternative. And even if you don't think he's a legitimate win threat, with the running style that he has, he's that kind of horse that if you're playing trifectas, you're playing superfectas, whatever else it may be, I think he's one you absolutely have to consider using because you know he's going to be finishing at the end. White Flag, the interesting thing about White Flag, he's the kind of horse that, going out for Christophe Clement, that for me the question was, is he this good? Because whenever they had tested him in the past, he just kind of, we've seen those kind of horses in the past where you can live in that sort of optional claiming level. You're very, very good. You get that slight class hike and you don't quite cut the mustard. White Flag, I thought he ran just fine here. You can argue this was a winning effort from him, and he just got outgamed. You don't lose anything here in defeat for White Flag. I thought this was good. He earns that 94 buyer. And really, for everyone else, I thought, for the most part, everyone ran well. I suppose Conquest Panthera was a little bit disappointing, but keeping in mind he had to come from the back of the pack, and that's not really what he's accustomed to doing. He's usually a bit more mid-pack. I don't think there's anyone that can really be disappointed with the way, or there's no gripes anyway, put it that way. I think everyone had an opportunity. The other concern, or question anyway, is you had 7 horses separated by roughly 2 lengths. Generally speaking, when they're all bunched up like that, and I know this is a turf race, and usually turf races, the finish is a heck of a lot closer than it is on dirt. Usually, if you can throw a blanket over them, maybe not the strongest race, but again, this configuration, perhaps it's a little bit different, and you got to take that with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, it was a very fun race to watch, very entertaining. Proforma gets the job done for Stidham and Bravo. Good ride from Joe Bravo. 94 Beyer speed figure winning the Kentucky Downs Turf Sprint. Sounds like the next possible start for him would be October the 6th at Keeneland in the Woodford, and then possibly parlaying that into a start in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint at Churchill Downs. Go a little bit out of order now. Race number 7 was the Kentucky Downs Ladies Turf. This was a field of 8. And your post-time favorite was I'm Betty G, but she was a little bit of a tepid choice in here at odds of 5-2. Right behind her, you had In the Lee at 3-1, and then you had 2 fillies coming into this spot at odds of 9-2. You had Paz de Soucy as well as Storm the Hill. Storm the Hill was coming in from Southern California, and if you thought that she could transfer that form over, yeah, she was a little bit interesting, but we've sort of seen the opposite be the case throughout history, or recent history anyway. East Coast horses going west on turf usually are the ones that find success, not the West Coast turf horses going east. We did have a West Coast horse going east have success. It was not Storm the Hill, though. Stretch run this year's Kentucky Downs Ladies Turf.
Ride early to keep up. On their outside comes Storm the Hill. Insta Irma's making a big run, and she's coming on the far outside, so Storm the Hill and Pas de Soucy. They're coming into deep stretch now. Insta Irma's putting in a big kick. She's coming up to Valadorna. These two going on from I'm Betty G. An 1/8 of a mile to go. Insta Irma and Drayden Van Dyke. Valadorna and Florent Giroux. These two tooth and nail, and it's a battle in the final 16. Valadorna, Insta Irma. Insta Irma, Valadorna, Insta Irma. And it's a second stakes win for Baltus and Van Dyke.
Insta Irma gets the job done at odds of 6-1 for Drayden Van Dyke and Richard Baltus. You can take a look. The runner-up was Valadorna at odds of 13-1, second longest shot on the board. And the third place finisher, Paz de Soucy, comes in at odds of 9-2 with Flavien Prat aboard. If you played the try for 50 cents, comes back $334.40. Let's take a look at Insta Irma. She's 5 of 19 lifetimes, 6 times other than those victories in the money, so she's rock solid. She's just under $570,000 in career earnings. Owned by Medallion Racing, Premier Racing Club, Jerry McClanahan, as well as Christopher Johnson. Trained by Richard Baltus. Bred by Zayat Stables LLC in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Drayden Van Dyke. And the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She's by Pioneer of the Nile out of a Woodman mare named Enchanted Woods. 98 buyer for the top 2, Insta Irma as well as Valadorna. Insta Irma comes home in 22.70. Thought she displayed a beautiful turn of foot in a spot like this. The only thing that makes me a little bit concerned about this race is someone that pays predominantly attention to Southern California. I feel like I kind of know Insta Irma. She's a nice filly, nice mare. She's 5 years old, but she's not a world beater. And the turn of foot that I saw from her on Saturday, she has shown that in Southern California at times, but even then, she's not necessarily, let's say, in the top 2 or 3, and it has been well documented in any of the previews that we do or in these recap editions of the Matt Bernier show that the Southern California fillies and mares on grass, they just kind of take turns speeding one another. It's a bit of a revolving door. So the fact that she's able to go here, it makes me think one of 2 things. Either she really loves this configuration at Kentucky Downs, or potentially this race was not all that in a bag of chips. When you have a horse like Storm the Hill, who is also a Southern California horse, a little bit exposed. We kind of know what she is. She's good, but she's no world beater. She runs 4th, and you've got other horses that kind of bombed, like I'm Betty G or In the Lee, where they just didn't pick their feet up really for the most part. I think you have to question a little bit how good this race was. Now, On the flip side, I think if you want to take a positive view of this race, you say Insta Irma, she has always shown some ability. This was her first start since early May when they chipped her to Churchill Downs. So who knows? Maybe she's sort of turned a corner and now this is what we're going to get out of her going forward, which is entirely possible. Again, it's not like she's a terrible horse. She's shown some ability and she's done some good things in the past. It's an interesting sort of race to sort of break down. I'm very, very interested, and if I'm taking anyone out of this race, I am taking the runner-up, Valladorna. Valladorna goes out for Mark Casse. This was her first time on turf. Now, again, this is a dangerous sort of proposition because did she really just like the Kentucky Downs turf course? Or is turf what she's wanted all along? She's already a graded stakes winner on dirt routing. I've never loved her, but the positional speed that she brings to the table, if she's now going to be a turf horse, that makes her very, very interesting. And when you take a look at the chart in this race, you see that the winner at the half-mile into the race at the pace call came from 7th, the third-place finisher came from 8th, and the fourth-place finisher came from 5th. Meanwhile, Valladorna was the one that was up there sitting just off of the fractions, eventually took over at one point, and dug in gamely to only lose by a neck to Insta Irma. Valladorna, I've already put her in my DRF horse watch. I'm going to be very interested to see what Mark Casse does with her, where they choose to bring her back. I'd like to see them give her a try on turf, but at a conventional sort of configuration. So whether it is Keeneland, whether it's Churchill Downs, whether it's somewhere else, I want to see if this is what she actually is, because you might actually get a decent price on her one more time, and perhaps that's the opportunity to either score or find out that, you know what, maybe it was just a Kentucky Downs kind of thing, because she put away the other speeds and she stayed on gamely. I thought this was a good effort from Valladorna in her first try on the grass. As far as the rest of the field is concerned, again, we talked about I'm Betty G a little bit when we talked about this race in the preview, and as well as out of the gate. She is nice. She is a good filly, but she's no superstar. And when she is the one that you have to beat, I'm usually looking at that saying, I'll take my chances against her. In the Lee, I suppose this was an okay effort, but not really. I mean, I didn't think there was any excuse. She finished 6th, and she never really looked like she was threatening at any point. And then she's another one that's sort of a tweener. Is she really a graded stakes level horse, or is she more sort of a listed or an optional claimer? As far as the rest of the field is concerned, again, don't have a heck of a lot to add. I think Insta Irma ran just fine. Be interesting to see where she shows up next. But of the horses coming out of this race, I am most interested in Valladorna simply because she is unexposed on grass. We don't know. Was this a matter of her really appreciating Kentucky Downs, or was this a matter of her really appreciating getting grass for the first time? And she's a daughter of Curlin. So she's the one that I've thrown in my horse watch, Valladorna. But for her on Saturday, she ran a great race. But there was one better. Insta Irma gets the job done coming in from Southern California with Drayden Van Dyke aboard. She earns a 98 buyer in this year's Kentucky Downs Ladies Turf. Last race to recap on this week's recap edition was the 8th race, the Kentucky Downs Ladies Sprint. Let's take a look at the field. Only 8 of them signed on. Your post-time favorite was Lull for Christophe Clement. She had had success at Kentucky Downs in the past. Now, whether the 6.5 furlongs is really what she wants, or is she more of a miler at this point, that's up to you as the handicapper to determine that. But at the end of the day, her credentials sort of spoke for themselves. She was the horse to beat in this spot. Unfortunately for her, there was another filly in here who's just rock solid right now and in razor-sharp form who got the job done. Here's the stretch run of this year's Kentucky Downs Ladies Sprint.
Come off of the turn now, top of the stretch, long run in here. It's Brielle's Appeal, Bixby Lou, but now here come both Ruby Notion and Lull. The two favorites are in gear. They have no excuse. Spelker coming after them, then Conte Partiro Originator. They're into deep stretch now. Lull is finding her best stride. Lull comes to take on Ruby Notion. Brielle's Appeal sticks in gamely, then Conte Partiro in deep stretch. Brielle's Appeal, Ruby Notion, these two. Ruby Notion, Brielle's Appeal. Ruby Notion has won the Kentucky Downs Ladies Sprint. It was very...
Ruby Notion gets the job done at odds of 3-1 as the second choice. She defeats Lull, the even money favorite, by a neck, and then third place, the pace setter, Brielle's Appeal. A very game effort from her at odds of 6-1 to finish third. Let's take a look a little bit deeper at Ruby Notion. Ruby Notion is 6 of 14 lifetime, over $426,000 in career earnings, owned by Silverton Hill LLC, trained by Darren Miller, bred by Silverton Hill Farm LLC in West Virginia. Ridden to victory by Florent Giroux, and you can take a look at the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She's by Great Notion out of a Volksrad mare named Modena Bay. 93 buyers for each the winner and runner-up. Ruby Notion and Lull, they both earn those 93s. You take a look at Brielle's Appeal. She earns a 92 buyer. Conte Partiro going out for Wesley Ward earns a 91 buyer speed figure. If you look at the come-home times, you have a horse like Ruby Notion that comes home in 29.50. Lull, 29.46. Brielle's Appeal, 29.89. Conte Partiro coming from a little bit farther back comes home in 29.30. Again, another race where I wish I had more to say as far as trips are concerned, pace scenarios, whatever else it may be. Just kind of feel like it was a very, very normally run race. Everyone that was good enough had an opportunity. Thought Brielle's Appeal was particularly game, digging in down on the inside. 6.5, she didn't have to love that, but I don't think there was any excuse for Lull not to get the job done. I just thought Ruby Notion was better. This is 2 consecutive victories. She had won a stakes race up at Saratoga over soft going. She gets a little bit more firm going this time around and a little bit additional distance. Doesn't matter. She's rock solid. The question now, I suppose, comes down to where does she go from here and what do they choose to do with her. Darren Miller's done a very good job conditioning her. I don't think she's a Breeders' Cup kind of horse, so if that's the case, then you probably look at one of those stakes races at Keeneland coming up in a few weeks, and then after that, who knows? Maybe you put her away for a little bit. Maybe you send her down to Florida. You have options, though. Ruby Notion, she's rock solid. She's in great form. Lull, I do wonder if she's probably or possibly a little bit better going a little bit longer, but look, she's very capable at a distance like this. She loses by a neck. She loses nothing in defeat. Thought it was a fine effort there. And again, Brielle's Appeal, I thought she ran really well here, considering she was the one out there cutting out the fractions, 23.45 and 4 for a half mile. At the end of the day, again, no real complaints about any of the trips for any of these girls. Thought everything worked out for the most part pretty well. Ruby Notion gets the job done by a neck over Lull as the second choice at odds of 3-1. Ruby Notion, a 93 buyer speed figure, winning this year's Kentucky Downs Ladies Sprint. That's going to button up the recaps, the in-depth ones, but now we'll throw it into the stakes montage from this past weekend. You'll have racing from Hastings, you'll have Woodbine, Belmont, Los Alamitos, you name it, you've got it. Here's this week's stakes montage.
Chased home by Miss Momentum. Hanley Moon in third. Cosmic Love is running on. Shamrock Rose targeted by Miss Momentum, but Shamrock Rose rocking along is well and truly gone in the La Lorgnette, and Shamrock Rose in peak form demolishes them by 4 or 5 lengths. Miss Momentum second. Another stakes win, Jerome Lermite. Miss Momentum second.
Dirty, and on the outside is Colonel Tom, the half in 45 and 1/5 seconds. And World of Trouble has taken over here. World of Trouble with a 5-length lead. Dirty giving chase in second. The others are far back. And no trouble at all for World of Trouble as he wins the Allied Forces Stakes. 6 furlongs on the Widener
As
turf.
they arrive at the top of the stretch, Gas Station Sushi turns them on down, and she still has something left. Whip is out on Steph, being Steph's trying to stay with the favorite. Can't do it right now. Best of Me running a good one in third, but it's Gas Station Sushi and Mario Gutierrez, and they're getting away in the Lewis. Gas Station Sushi on her game in the comeback, 5-6 lengths in front, and geared down to take the Beverly J. Lewis with ease. Steph, being Steph, was second, tight for third as they chase Shades of Victory into the straightaway. B squared, Edwards going left, now surrounding him and trying to come after this long shot. Shades of Victory needs just over a furlong more. He's still there. B squared trying to push on by. Edwards going left down on the inside. B squared outside of Shades of Victory at the 16th pole. B squared, Shades of Victory hanging tough, and Edwards going left. Shades of Victory's 80-1 in the E.B. Johnston. Tight place.
And down the lane, Mexican Hat coming, my arch enemy, joined by Mexican Hat and Gamble's Ghost. She started to gather ground on them on the outside. Mexican Hat went up to join my arch enemy, and Gamble's Ghost running them down late. Gamble's Ghost on the outside. Gamble's Ghost in a photo with my arch enemy. Mexican Hat the center.
Outside of Come Dancing, and Burned is down towards the rail. 3/4 in 1:13 and 2. They're inside the 3/16 pole. Come Dancing with something left here. Come Dancing has opened up on the field. Come Dancing by 4 lengths. Then No Need to Appeal and Burned, and Johnny Velasquez put Come Dancing on the lead, and she was never headed. Come Dancing wins the Royal Delta Stakes.
There you have it, this week's stakes montage, and as we always do in the recap edition, let's throw it into the weekend's best performances from a buyer speed figure standpoint. We'll begin with the 2-year-old males on the dirt, looking at bikinis. 91 in a maiden special weight at Belmont Park. 2-year-old fillies, Summerland, an 80 buyer in an allowance race at Hastings. 2-year-old males on turf. Current, 70 buyer, maiden special weight at Belmont Park. 2-year-old fillies on turf. Moonlight Romance, a 65 in the Kentucky Downs Juvenile Turf Sprint. 3-year-old male on dirt. Mo Diddley, a 95 buyer and non-winners of 2 other than at Belmont Park. 3-year-old fillies on dirt. Gas Station Sushi winning the Beverly Lewis with a 94 buyer at Los Alamitos Race Course. 3-year-old males on turf. World of Trouble, a 103 buyer winning the Allied Forces at Belmont Park. 3-year-old females on turf. Originator, well beaten, but she earns an 85 in the Kentucky Downs Ladies Sprint against older horses. Older males on dirt. We have a 3-way tie. Shades of Victory, B Squared, and Edwards going left. 95 buyers in the E.B. Johnston at Los Alamitos. You saw that in the stakes montage. Older fillies on dirt. Divine Miss Gray in the Penny Memorial at Park. She earns a 91 buyer speed figure. Older males on turf. So I'm at the top of the show. Arklow gets the job done in the Kentucky Turf Cup with a 100 buyer. In the older fillies on turf, fillies and mares on turf, Insta Irma and Valadorna, they both earn 98 buyers, in this year's ladies turf at Kentucky Downs. There you have it. The weekend's best as far as buyer speed figure performances are concerned here on the Matt Bernier Show, the recap edition. DRF TV's schedule of events. Let's take a look. Things are going to change a little bit already because Laurel Park has moved their big card of racing, postponed it for a week because of the oncoming storm. That means that the Francis Dash is going to be buttoned back about a week now at this point, but you'll still have plenty of stakes previews. You will have Out of the Gate. You'll have the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. You'll have Woodbine Plays of the Day, particularly important this week because Saturday's Woodbine Play of the Day also happens to be the DRF race of the day, the Grade 1 Woodbine Mile up at Woodbine, a one-turn configuration. That should be a fun race. Looked at the probables earlier this morning. Looks like it should be a pretty darn good field if they all decide to go there. You will have the Weekend Warrior, Mike Watchmaker. You'll have the Watchmaker Watch. You name it. It's all going to be out there. DRF Players Podcast. Can't forget that. It's all out there. You can find it all on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. For those of you that have listened to this live on Tuesday, thank you for doing so. Live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. If you listen to this in podcast like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify over on YouTube. Click that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Always appreciated. Same goes for iTunes. Write us a review. Give us a positive rating. Always appreciated. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever else it may be, fire away at me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt, or beneath the video player on the YouTube channel. Until I come back with the preview edition, again, we'll be going over the 2-year-old fillies and the 2-year-old males. I'm sorry, we did the 2-year-old males. I'm all over the place. 2-year-old fillies from Saratoga and Del Mar. We will go over a few of those. I'll give you the NFL Week 2 trifecta. Started off on a high note, 3-0 this past week. Let's keep this thing rolling into Week 2. And then perhaps we'll take a look at a few races depending on time. If not, you can find those in the stakes previews as well as the latest edition of Out of the Gate. But definitely we'll go over 2-year-old fillies from Saratoga and Del Mar. We'll go over the NFL Week 2 trifecta and then maybe sprinkle in some quick hits if we can and we have some time. Until I come back for the preview edition, thank you for watching this. Best of luck however you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing. This has been the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show.